25th Annual Copenhagen Democracy Summit. It is wonderful to have a full live audience again, as well as a virtual one, to explore ways to renew, reinvigorate, and reinforce democracy around the world. I'm Jeanne Meserve. I'm going to be guiding you through the program for the next day and a half. I'm a member of the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity. I'm a co-host of the SpyTalk Podcast, which you should all download. I'm also a former anchor and correspondent for both CNN and ABC News. As a journalist, I am horrified that mis- and disinformation has infected so many people, that there is so much distrust of news outlets, that press freedoms are being curtailed in many places, and that reporters are being harassed, imprisoned, and even killed for doing their jobs. Their job, simply put, is to strengthen democracy by exposing corruption and wrongdoing, and by giving voice to those who may feel left out or left behind. And the erosion of the free press is just one of several indicators that democracy is being buffeted. Study after study, whether it's from Freedom House or The Economist or others, shows that democracy is in retreat around the world while autocracies grow in strength and in number. But this can be a moment where democracies can regain their footing and even gain ground. Russia's war in Ukraine has clarified everything that's at stake and brought many of the world's democracies together in common purpose. Over the next day and a half, we will assess where we are, and we will talk about what needs to be done to shore up our institutions, meet the needs of our citizens, and work together effectively to counter authoritarianism. Today will be devoted to technology. We'll explore how it can be leveraged to strengthen democracy. Friday will revolve around defense of Ukraine and how to build an even more robust alliance of democracies. We have an outstanding roster of guests for you, but before the program gets underway, a few reminders. Follow today's discussion and participate in it on social media using the hashtags CDS2022 and hashtag Defend Democracy. You can get information about the summit, the schedule, and the speakers at the conference website, CopenhagenDemocracySummit.com. But we also suggest that you download the app. Go to your app store, search for Copenhagen Democracy Summit. You can download it then. Using the question function on that app, you will be able to submit your questions for the panelists who will be on the stage in the next day and a half. And if you're having any problems, look for the volunteers. They're identifiable in those white shirts. All of them are very familiar with the technology that can give you a helping hand. So now, let's get down to business. Technology, as I mentioned, is the theme for this afternoon. And who better to open that discussion than the chairman of the Special Competitive Studies Project, co-founder of Schmidt Futures, and the former CEO of Google, Dr. Eric Schmidt, who joins us to offer his thoughts on the question, will technology keep benefiting democracy? Dr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Jeannie, for taking the time and inviting me to this incredible event. I was here last year as well. We're all convulsed by the horrific stuff going on in Ukraine. Let me tell you that what you're seeing in Ukraine is to some degree the difference between a networked war and a hierarchical war being played out by Russia. And we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, we want freedom and democracy to win. What is going on in Ukraine is nothing compared to what would happen with a real conflict with China. And I'm really struck by how China continues to get stronger, changes the world around us, and we're still not ready to prepare to fight for our principles and to win in the key battles. Now, why do I say this? Well, if you look at the United States, which I'm most familiar with, the 5 most valuable companies in the United States are tech companies. The 3 most valuable companies in China are tech companies. The tech companies are roughly 30% of the total market value of the United States. So if you don't think tech matters, look at the math. So I am convinced that the battle between us and China will be the defining battle for the rest of our lives, and that we need to not take our eye off the ball, and I want to explain why. And I view this as sort of a battle between open and closed systems, and I want to explain what I mean by that. But I start, when I think about China, but I think about what have they said Because sometimes when you say something, it's actually what you're doing as a government. Maybe, maybe not. But in China's case, I think it's sincere. First, they talk about dual circulation, which can be understood in the following principle. They want to be less dependent on other countries, and they want other countries to be more dependent on them. Well, that's a pretty good deal if you're the center country in the world. And somehow when I was growing up in the United States, somehow I thought that was the role that the US played. They've announced that they are going to be dominant, according to their strategy, in AI by 2030. I led a commission for the National US Congress, which said that the US and the West are still ahead, but not by much, maybe a few years, maybe less than that. They have recently announced a strategy to be a leader in synthetic biology. Synthetic biology is not making humans. Synthetic biology is growing things that we used to manufacture. And for many, many reasons, people think that synthetic biology is somewhere between a $4 and a $30 trillion worldwide industry in the next few years. This is an industry, by the way, for which Europe is a crucial competitor. China has announced its research and investment directions completely in the same direction as what's happening in the West. Let's take a look at new energy. New energy is defined as solar, batteries, all the things that everyone in this audience cares about. Who is the primary supplier of all those components? China. They're also going to be the primary supplier of hydrogen systems, the electrolysis that's involved in other aspects of dealing with climate change, et cetera. As technologists, they will build global scale platforms for technology, and then they will interconnect them. They're already leading in financial services. They operate largely as a cashless society, and they have significant investments in quantum, various other forms of transportation, and of course, face recognition and surveillance. Now, they approach these problems very differently than the West. In China, they pick winners. The government funds those winners, and they also prioritize and deprioritize things. Now, much has been written about how the Chinese crackdown on the tech companies is really at least bumming out the people who are in charge of them, and that this is somehow thought to be a dent, if you will, in the future for Chinese innovation. To the contrary, what they've decided to do as a country and through industrial policy is to prioritize on deep tech. Deep tech is the hard stuff. They don't want these huge web companies becoming either political or social upheavals in their one country state. So they're busy investing. They've just shifted their investment to some other areas. So one way to think about their approach is it's very different from the Democratic. Theirs is closed. They pick winners, they integrate them together, and they tell them what to do. That is completely the opposite of the messy innovation system in the West. And it is the fundamental conflict is these two models. Now you sit there and you go, that sounds rhetorical. We like open, they don't want to be called closed and so forth. I mean it in a more technical way. So let's imagine you have all these batteries, and the batteries, of course, have software that controls them. And let's imagine that a future version of the battery system allows you to have all the batteries turn off at the same time using a proprietary Chinese program. Now, today, I'm not aware of that, but it's an obvious upgrade to their current strategy once they have dominant supply in batteries. Now, that doesn't mean we shouldn't use their batteries, but it means that there's a difference between systems which are components and systems which are integrated. Now, I don't mind, for example, and I don't want to get into a debate about all of this, with components, things like steel and oil and the other things that people worry about. But if you look around in the room that you're in, look at everything around you. All that tech is coming out of China. That's very strategic. But the doorknobs probably are too. A lot of the fittings around the chair that you're on are coming from there. That's probably not such a big concern. So when you think about it, we've got to get our act together, and I'll finish by saying the following. We've got to get our act together as to how this defining competition between China and the West will work. We have to get our act together because their incentive is not openness. Look at what they've done. Read the rhetoric from, it's called, I think, Article 9 or something 9, that she said last year that was leaked or allegedly leaked. Their rhetoric is control and closed systems. That is, it doesn't work with the economic system of the West. It also doesn't work with the communication systems and the open culture of the West. So what should we do? And I'll just end with the list. The first is we need more people working on this stuff. The second thing is that we need lots of people working in collaboration across the West. The governments have organized themselves around having various groups which are called technology communications committees, European emerging tech committees, and so forth. Those things have to strengthen. We have to have the same lists. Each of the democracies has to have a same high-level list of prioritizations. And by the way, that list of prioritizations is the same one as China has. So at least we know we're in the right contest, and it's important that we win. Trust me, if we don't win AI, synthetic biology, and energy and the other aspects, you're not going to like it, because you're not going to like having a different system, a different political system controlling the world that you walk around and think in. Thank you, Jeannie, and I'd love to take questions or comments or reactions from the audience. Thank you.
And I have a couple right off the bat. And first is, you're well aware of the competitive situation. You've studied it extensively. Is the free world still leading in technology, or is it not?
So I'll give you the list. We're leading in AI a little bit. We have more scale in synthetic biology. China's approaching very, very quickly, and they have a slightly different approach. They may win there. We are losing in energy, and we're doing that because energy is a scale platform. We are winning in semiconductors, and I think that semiconductors are going to be very difficult for China to catch up in for all sorts of reasons, including an amazing company called ASML, which is European. And in quantum, it's too early to say, but the US seems to be leading for a while. China is leading in financial services and in surveillance, which of course we don't want to do. So that's the state of the race today. It's much closer between the two than I thought 2 years ago.
There are young people and technologists who want to contribute to the democratic side of the ledger. For these young people, what pieces of advice do you have for them?
Well, the most important thing for a young person now is to develop an analytical background, because the world will be run analytically. You'll need to, whether it's your earlier point in your introduction about misinformation or other things that happen, our young people need to be able to think critically and do data analytics. As a career choice, I would tell people, choose biology. And the reason I would say choose biology is today what computer science was when I got into it 45 years ago. Completely new, completely vast, enormous sums of money and investment to be made, and so forth and so on. It's in its golden moment. And I would recommend biology or the AI systems that I have been working on, which are called large language models. They're incredibly powerful, incredibly complicated, and incredibly exciting.
We do have some audience questions as well, and a reminder to all of you to use your app to submit your questions. Here's one. Artificial intelligence seems to be for the 21st century what nuclear science was for the 20th century, one of the most revolutionary innovations that will significantly change human lives. How likely do you think the world will be able to agree on an internationally binding set of rules to prevent AI war? And what would it need to move closer to such an agreement, or at least a conversation with China?
That question is such a good question. I wrote a book on it with Dr. Henry Kissinger called The Age of AI.
Go buy it.
Yes, this is not a plug for my book, but in the book we talk about what the history of nuclear was, which of course he participated in, and what the likely history for AI is. At the moment, we don't have the diplomats, and we don't have the political system, and we don't have the pressure to cause even the right meetings to start. You have reluctance of the security services, for obvious reasons, to share any of the things they're doing. Furthermore, if you tell the other side you're working on something, you've confirmed that it's possible, and then they'll start it. So it's highly unlikely that there'll be any significant conversations between the China and the West on these issues. And this is a crisis, in my view. And the reason is that eventually somebody's going to build an automatic weapon system using AI that will automatically make decisions about conflict and war, and that is incredibly destabilizing. In the National Science Committee, National Security Committee work that we did, and in the book that Kissinger and Dan Huttenlocher and I wrote, we say specifically, Any kind of automatic weapon system, something which substitutes computer decision-making for human decision-making, is incredibly dangerous for a world order. It can lead to catastrophe. And my definition of catastrophe is a major full-on conflict between the nuclear powers.
We have another question. Is there enough cohesion in the free world to face a closed system like China?
Again, excellent question. What's funny about, here we are, we're in Europe. I guess I'm in Britain, which is not the same thing as Europe anymore, but we're still friends. We spend all of our time talking about the difference between the US and Britain and Europe, but in fact, we are 99.99% aligned. The rights of individuals, the rights of women, the rights of free speech, the rights of political movement, the rights of having life without surveillance unless you're guilty of something and have been convicted. Those principles, which were invented hundreds of years ago by our predecessors, are at the core values of what we believe. So yes, we actually agree with each other, and the lists are the same. We have a coordination problem, and we have a political problem. The coordination problem is there's lots of other things going on in the world, and this is one of those things which takes years to work on, and we might as well get started now. And in our political system, we only do things when there's a crisis. Let me point out that the nuclear, the whole nuclear regime of détente and mutually assured destruction and containment came after the horrific use of 2 nuclear weapons, and people saw the damage of it. I don't want to have to go through that with AI. I really don't. And by the way it would happen is it would initially happen through some biological attack, because that's where the AI impact on negative outcomes will be the quickest.
Dr. Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you very much.